The night my boyfriend's best friend looked me in the eye, inside the house I paid for, and said, "David could do way better than you." I didn't throw her out. I did something worse. I opened my banking app in front of everyone and showed exactly how much of my money had been keeping both of them comfortable. David's response? He stood beside her and said, "Apologize to Maya right now, or we're over." I smiled. "Then, over it is, sweetheart." What neither of them understood was that I wasn't just David's fiancé. I was a forensic accountant, and by the next morning, I had already started closing the books on his entire life. My name is Belle Gonzalez. I was 32 when this happened. My job had taught me one rule that eventually saved me. Don't argue with someone's version of reality. Document it. 4 years before everything fell apart, I bought a neglected ranch in East Austin. For 3 years, I spent nights and weekends renovating it myself until it finally felt like mine. The money wasn't what mattered. That house represented thousands of hours of my life. Every room was something I'd built. Then, David Calloway walked into it. I met David at a UT Business School networking event. He was 28, starting his MBA, sharp, ambitious, and incredibly easy to talk to. I respected his drive. For the first few months, I thought I'd finally met someone who wanted to build rather than simply benefit. Then David told me his tuition was about $52,000 a year. I offered to cover it. "Belle, that's insane. Focus on school. I'll handle it." He hugged me. "We're building something together," I told him. At the time, I believed that. 8 months later, David's car died. I bought him a certified pre-owned 2019 Honda Accord for $16,200. The title stayed in my name. When his lease ended, he moved into my house. He paid about $600 toward groceries and utilities. I covered almost everything else. Then something subtle changed. My house became our house. My Accord became our car. My financial success became our success. Couples say ours, so I ignored it. My profession had trained me not to overreact to isolated incidents. Patterns mattered. Then I met Maya Davidson, David's longtime best friend. From our first meeting, there was something territorial about her. She didn't talk to me like David's fiancée. She evaluated me like someone applying for the position. Then came the comparisons. I'd cook dinner. David's ex used to make incredible homemade pasta. I bought David a nice watch for his birthday. Maya smiled. Corporate people always solve emotions with purchases. David laughed. I didn't. Maya painted me as safe, practical, predictable. Meanwhile, she positioned herself as the person who understood the real David. And whenever I questioned her behavior, David defended her with the same line. "She knew me before you did." Then Maya started appearing in my finances. Over the next few months, David used the joint account I primarily funded to cover her car repairs and rent shortages. Thousands of dollars eventually went to her. She never paid it back. When I confronted David, he rolled his eyes. "Maya is family. Family can repay loans. Why does everything have to be transactional with you?" "Because you're transferring my money. Our money." I remember staring at him. He didn't even notice what he'd said. I did. Still, I waited. I watched. I documented. Then I closed the biggest case of my career. After 6 brutal months, my work helped our client recover $2.8 million. I decided to celebrate at home. Good friends. Good food. The people who'd supported me while I'd practically disappeared into work. "Invite whoever you want," I told David. Then I mentioned a $2,500 budget. David quickly turned my celebration into something far more luxurious than I'd intended. "This is our moment," he said. Our moment. My case. My 6 months of brutal hours. But somehow, our moment. I ignored that too. The party started beautifully. For the first time in months, I relaxed. Then, 40 minutes late, Maya walked through my front door. She didn't knock. She used David's key. No apology. No congratulations. She helped herself to a drink. Nice setup, Belle. Thanks. Really shows what you can accomplish when money is your main priority. One of my coworkers looked at me. I ignored it. A little later, Maya turned toward David. I just want to make sure you're actually happy. David gave a nervous laugh. Maya. No, seriously. She looked at me. Belle is obviously a great provider. She gives you stability. She takes care of you. Provider. Not partner. David nodded slowly. That nod bothered me more than anything she'd said. Then Maya leaned back. But let's be honest. The room quieted. She looked directly into my eyes. We both know David could do way better than you. Silence. Absolute silence. One of my colleagues froze with his glass halfway to his mouth. I looked at David. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even surprised. He looked embarrassed that Maya had said it publicly. That's when I understood. He didn't disagree. He simply wished she'd kept it private. I placed my glass down. Maya. She smiled. Yes? That's an interesting assessment. Her expression shifted. What does better look like? She shrugged. Someone who understands him. Financially? Emotionally? Professionally? She rolled her eyes. You're doing that interrogation thing. I'm establishing your criteria. Nobody spoke. I pulled out my phone. David immediately stiffened. Belle. David's MBA costs roughly $52,000 annually. His face changed. I continued. The Accord cost $1,600 to $200. I cover nearly all our household expenses. Maya's smile disappeared. I opened my transaction history. But if you're evaluating my qualifications, let's evaluate yours. Maya doesn't need David. She introduced finances when she called me a provider. I looked directly at Maya. March 15th, $420 for your power steering. She froze. May 22nd, $615 for transmission work. Someone quietly coughed. Then we have the rent shortages. I scrolled through them, hundreds at a time. None repaid. By the time I finished, Maya's face had gone pale. So let me understand your argument, I said. You criticize the woman supporting David's education and lifestyle, while personally taking thousands of dollars from an account funded by that same woman. Belle, enough. David stood abruptly. For one foolish second, I thought he was finally angry with Maya. Then he looked at me. You completely humiliated her. I stared at him. She insulted me in my own house. You didn't have to expose all of that. She brought my finances into the conversation. This isn't one of your cases. No. I gestured around us. This is my home. Our home. There it was again. David's voice rose. Maya is the only person who actually sees me for who I am sometimes. You think paying for everything gives you the right to judge people. I never said that. You don't have to. Behind him, Maya remained strangely quiet. David looked around the room. Nobody supported him. That seemed to make him angrier. I'm done with this. Okay. No, Belle, I'm serious. So am I. His jaw tightened. Then he played what he believed was his winning hand. You apologize to Maya right now for humiliating her, or we're over. The room stopped breathing. David looked completely certain. He expected me to panic, to think about 3 years together, the wedding, and everything I'd invested in him. Unfortunately for David, forensic accountants have another name for that. Sunk cost fallacy. I looked at the house I'd renovated, the people I'd invited, the woman he'd allowed to disrespect me. Then, I looked directly at him, and smiled. Then over it is, sweetheart. David blinked. What? You gave me 2 options. I stood. I picked one. I walked toward the kitchen. Behind me, David inhaled sharply. For the first time in our relationship, his ultimatum hadn't worked. He left with Maya that night. I didn't follow him, didn't text, didn't call. David thought I'd calm down. He thought I'd miss him. He thought I'd apologize. By Saturday morning, I had his belongings boxed, my financial records open, a locksmith scheduled, and 4 phone calls written on a legal pad. Because David had forgotten the most important thing about the woman he'd just threatened to leave. I didn't make my living begging people to tell me the truth. I made my living documenting what happened after they lied. And David had just handed me permission to stop paying for his life. For 3 weeks, I disappeared from David's life. No calls, no texts, no responses. But I wasn't sitting at home crying. I was separating our lives. That first weekend, I packed everything David owned into labeled boxes and photographed them before sealing them. Billy came over while a locksmith changed the locks and reset the security system. Then I handled the financial ties. I informed UT that I would no longer be paying David's tuition. His next $26,000 payment was due in 18 days. I contacted my firm about the summer internship I'd helped him secure. I withdrew my recommendation and disclosed the personal conflict. Whatever happened with the internship after that was no longer my responsibility. I removed David from my auto insurance, canceled his authorized user credit card, and contacted my attorney to document the end of our cohabitation and the ownership of anything that could later become disputed. Then I sent David one message. Please return the engagement ring within 10 calendar days. Coordinate with Billy to collect your belongings. I followed it with certified mail. Finally, I reclaimed the Honda. The title was mine. So was the car. That's when David realized I wasn't waiting for an apology. His voicemail on day 4 was furious. You can't just take my car. I need it for school. Call me immediately. Day 7 sounded different. Belle, UT contacted me. They're saying the tuition payment isn't scheduled. What did you do? By day 12, the anger had disappeared. Please call me. I know you're hurt, but we can work this out. Don't throw away 3 years because of one stupid fight. One stupid fight. That was how he'd rewritten it. Not an ultimatum. Not choosing Maya after she insulted me in my own home. A fight. I saved every voicemail. Exactly 3 weeks after the party, my security system alerted me that someone was at the front door. I checked the camera. David. He tried his old key once, then twice, then stared at the lock like it had personally betrayed him. He rang the bell. I opened the door but left the security chain attached. Belle, we need to talk. No, we don't. His expression hardened. You've ignored me for 3 weeks. You told me to apologize to Maya or our engagement was over. I was angry. And I accepted your terms. You can't throw away 3 years over one fight. It wasn't a fight, David. It was an ultimatum. He stared at me. For the first time, I could see him understanding that I wasn't punishing him until he apologized. There was no route back. What about school? What about it? My tuition. Your tuition. His face changed. You seriously didn't pay it? Why would I? I was paying because we were building a future together. You ended that future. The color drained from his face. You knew I couldn't come up with $26,000 in 18 days. Yes. What am I supposed to do? For years, I'd been the answer to that question. Now he had to find another one. I assume you and Maya can figure something out. His jaw tightened. This is because of her? No. This is because of you. What about the internship? I withdrew my recommendation. His eyes widened. You're destroying my career. No, David. I'm simply no longer building it for you. He stepped closer. You can't do this to me. I'm not doing anything to you. I'm no longer doing things for you. There's a difference. His expression twisted. This is financial abuse. No, this is a breakup. I started closing the door. He put his hand against it. What about my stuff? Boxed. Coordinate with Billy. I live here. You lived here. This is my house too. No. The word came out so calmly that he stopped. You contributed toward groceries and utilities. You never bought this house. You never paid the mortgage. Your name isn't on the deed. His face flushed. So that's it? 3 years and I'm suddenly nothing? You're my ex-fiancé. David laughed bitterly. You really are cold. Maybe. All because Maya said something stupid? I stared at him. No. Because when Maya said something stupid, you showed me exactly where I stood. That landed. For half a second, he had nothing. Then the anger returned. I'll get a lawyer. Okay. I'll sue you. For what? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I closed the door. David stood on the porch for another minute before walking toward a rideshare waiting at the curb. That should have been the end. It wasn't. Mutual friends started calling with David's version of events. According to him, I'd financially trapped him, promised to support him through school, then destroyed his future because my ego had been bruised. I stopped explaining myself. Then Maya called. Belle, you're taking this way too far. Maya, you told a room full of people David could do better than me. I was angry. So was he. He made a mistake. He made a choice. You're ruining his life. No, I'm no longer financing it. Silence. Then Maya said, not everything is about money. I almost smiled. Great. Then losing mine shouldn't be a problem. She hung up. David's behavior escalated after that. He showed up at my office twice and was escorted out by security. Then he waited for me in the parking garage. That was when I stopped treating him like a bitter ex and started treating him like a legal problem. I called the police. Between the voicemails, security reports, parking garage incident, and footage from my house, there was plenty of documentation. Eventually, I obtained a restraining order. David finally stopped showing up, but the consequences didn't. He couldn't make the tuition payment. 4 months before finishing his MBA, David withdrew from UT. The student debt remained. The internship I'd once helped him pursue was no longer part of his future either. Without my house, my car, or my financial support, David needed somewhere to live. So he moved in with Maya. The arrangement deteriorated quickly. David had debt, no completed MBA, no car, and little income. Maya couldn't provide the financial stability he'd taken for granted with me. Soon they were fighting. David blamed Maya for encouraging the ultimatum. Maya reminded him that he'd been the one who delivered it. The woman who'd spent years telling David he deserved better than me was discovering that better came with bills. There was one last financial issue to clean up. My attorney had asked me to review the remaining transactions from the account David and I had shared, making sure there was nothing that could later become disputed. That's when Maya's name kept appearing. Car repairs, rent shortages, payments David had made using money I'd primarily deposited. As I organized the records, something didn't add up. What I could independently verify suggested Maya's photography income and financial activity didn't entirely match the story she'd been telling people. I didn't investigate beyond what was already relevant to my own records, and I didn't draw conclusions. I documented what I could independently verify and sent it to the appropriate authorities for them to evaluate. Then I closed the file and went back to my life. What happened next wasn't up to me. Several weeks later, Billy called. You heard about Maya? No. There was a pause. She got hit with a tax audit. I leaned back in my chair. How bad? Apparently bad. I said nothing. Billy laughed quietly. You went forensic again, didn't you? I reported information. The government decides what it means. That is the most Bell answer imaginable. But the audit was only the first problem. Once Maya's finances came under real scrutiny, other weaknesses in the life she'd built began surfacing, and David was living right in the middle of them. The man who'd chosen Maya because she supposedly understood him better was about to discover something I'd learned years earlier. People can romanticize instability when somebody else is paying the bill. It's much harder when the bill finally arrives in your own name. Maya's tax audit didn't destroy her overnight. Reality was slower than that. Letters arrived. Deadlines followed. Then came questions about income she'd earned through photography work and whether everything had been properly reported. I stayed out of it. I'd submitted what I could independently verify. What the authorities did with it was their business. But according to Billy, Maya eventually faced back taxes, penalties, and interest totaling more than $30,000. Her photography income started drying up. Money got tighter. and the apartment that had supposedly represented freedom became a pressure cooker. David and Maya started blaming each other. One argument apparently got loud enough for a neighbor to complain. "You told me Belle was holding you back," Maya shouted. "And you told me I deserved better," David fired back. Maybe they both finally understood the problem. Better had always been theoretical when I was paying the bills. Now, they had to live it. Eventually, Maya couldn't keep the apartment. 2 weeks before she had to leave, she disappeared. David came home and found her belongings gone. She left a note saying she needed space to figure out her life. I laughed when Billy told me. Not because David was suffering, because Maya had spent years presenting herself as the one person who would always understand him. Apparently, that promise had an expiration date. David tried contacting me again. Not directly. The restraining order made that complicated. Instead, one of our mutual friends called. "David wants to know if you'd be willing to talk." "No. He's in a bad place." "I understand. He says he realizes he made a mistake." "I'm sure he does." There was a pause. "He thinks Maya manipulated him." That almost impressed me. Even after everything, David was still searching for someone else to own his decisions. "Maya didn't give me the ultimatum," I said. "David did." That was the end of the conversation. There was still one unfinished issue between us. David never returned the $4,800 engagement ring. After repeated requests failed, I took the matter through the proper legal process and eventually recovered its value. I thought that finally closed the file. 4 months later, an attorney contacted me. David was threatening legal action alleging financial abuse and emotional distress. According to his version, I'd used money to control him throughout our relationship and then deliberately destroyed his education and career when he tried to leave. Fortunately, I'd spent my professional life preparing for people who rewrote history after the numbers stopped benefiting them. I had tuition records showing voluntary payments, the accord title, house records, joint account statements, the certified letter after our breakup, voicemails, security reports, police documentation, the restraining order, and witnesses from the dinner party where David himself had told me our relationship was over unless I apologized to Maya. I gave everything to my attorney. After my attorney responded with the documentation, the threatened lawsuit never materialized. That was the last legal contact I ever received from David. Life became strangely quiet afterward. For the first time in 3 years, nobody questioned why I worked late. Nobody transferred money from my account to rescue a friend. Nobody explained that stability made me boring while benefiting from every ounce of stability I'd created. My house felt like mine again. Not because David's boxes were gone, because I stopped feeling like I needed to justify what I'd built. About a year later, I ran into Bella, one of the friends who'd been at the dinner party. Eventually, she gave me the update I hadn't asked for. David was working again. His version of the story hadn't changed much. I was controlling. I weaponized money. Maya had become the selfish friend who abandoned him when he needed her most. I shook my head. "Of course." Bella smiled. "You don't seem surprised. David's story always requires somebody else to be responsible." And Maya? She'd eventually found a regular corporate photography job. I couldn't help smiling at that one. The woman who'd mocked my practical life had finally discovered the usefulness of predictable paychecks. I didn't celebrate either outcome. By then, I didn't need to. My career kept moving. The house stayed mine. The money I used to pour into David's life went back into savings, travel, and things I actually wanted. And I became much more careful about confusing generosity with partnership. Billy still talked about the dinner occasionally. He called it, "The night Belle went forensic." But people always assumed the dinner was the moment I got revenge. It wasn't. The most important moment happened seconds before I said those 4 words. Then, "Over it is, sweetheart." Because that was when I finally understood what David had misunderstood for 3 years. Paying for someone's education didn't make me responsible for finishing it. Buying someone a car didn't mean I owed them transportation forever. Letting someone live in my house didn't make it theirs. And loving someone didn't mean I had to keep financing their choices after they decided I wasn't good enough for them. David believed his ultimatum gave him power. Instead, it gave me clarity. He told me to apologize to the woman who disrespected me or lose him. I chose to lose him. Everything that disappeared afterward, his tuition, the car, the internship connection, the house, the lifestyle, wasn't something I took away from him. It was support I stopped providing after he ended the relationship that support had been built around. There's a difference. I lost 3 years, a wedding that never happened, and a man I once believed I'd grow old with. I regretted that. But I never regretted refusing to apologize. Because David's biggest mistake was confusing access to my life with ownership of it. My house, my money, my future. He'd called everything ours for so long that he'd forgotten where it came from. Then he threatened to walk away. So, I let him. And for the first time, David discovered what over actually meant.